Hello, ladies and gents, boys and girls, people of all ages, sexualities, and identities, and welcome back to another Sarah Jane Adventures review. And we're finally on Series 4, where we're going to start with the Nightmare Man. So, who is the Nightmare Man? Well, he is a very interesting anomaly. He comes from the same sort of place as the Trickster and the Pantheon and a bunch of other sort of godlike creatures. However, for the Nightmare Man to exist, he must have someone be afraid. Think of him in a way a bit like the Sandman. He feeds on people's dreams. He seeps into them and takes what he wants. And in Luke's case, Luke has a lot of stress going on in his life at the moment. With school and moving away and going off to college, he's not quite sure if he's ready for that change, especially leaving behind all the people he loves on Bannerman Road. And so the Nightmare Man takes advantage of this and traps Luke Smith inside of his own dreams. And as it begins to close in on him, Luke tries to video record himself to remind his mum of what's going on. Luke then finds that Rani and Clyde also get locked in their dreams. And so it helps the Nightmare Man so much, because then he is real. The Nightmare Man plays on so many of Luke's fears, and most importantly, starts to make him feel like no one will ever love him. He also plays on the fear of the fact that Luke is technically adopted and the way that Sarah Jane is going to just get another kid and replace him. Meanwhile, for the other two's kind of fears, he plays on the fact that Rani Chandra isn't sure if she'll ever be a top journalist, and the best way to get back at Rani for this is the Nightmare Man uses the idea of her having to scapegoat Sarah Jane Smith for journalism. He then plays on Clyde's fear of being always a loser and a joker, and so traps him in a bar making burgers. The Nightmare Man struggles to get to Sarah Jane, however, because she has of course overcome a lot of her fears. Except one little tiny fear. The fear that the Doctor will never come back and see her ever again. And so this begins to play on Sarah's mind as the Nightmare Man begins to attack her. He also destroys Mr. Smith for a temporary process and shuts his systems down. He does this because Mr. Smith knows too much about the Nightmare Man. However, luckily for Luke, now that he's in his nightmares with Rani and Clyde, they all manage to break out of those nightmares and band together. Except the Nightmare Man is a little bit more powerful than they first thought. He can send them back to their nightmares. He can send them back to their dreams, the Betty buys, and they will not be together. However, he doesn't anticipate that no matter where they are, no matter what he does to them, Luke, Rani, and Clyde will stick together through thick and thin. And there is nothing the Nightmare Man can do to stop that. When they begin to overcome their fears in their nightmares, the Nightmare Man retreats slowly and surely, and once again goes off into the cosmos and is left in the place of dreams. Luke and Clyde and Rani come together at the end of the story, and essentially they remind Luke that he will never be forgotten and will always have a place here on Bannerman Road. And of course, Sarah Jane Smith is mad about him. She'd never let anything come between them. So, what did I think of The Nightmare Man? It is honestly one of my favourite stories out there. It's really solid, and I like the way that Julian Bleach is playing this kind of gothic sort of villain in this story. He really puts on a show with the Nightmare Man and plays with the heartstrings. And the thing I love the most is that they didn't go over the top with the Nightmare Man. The way that he is simplistic with his makeup design, and the way that he is simplistic with the fact that we just have a bunch of different rooms for the sets. I feel like what's very solid about this. I love that the way that the nightmare trips all play on individual places. For instance, Luke struggling at the party with Rani and Clyde, and the way that his social angst and his lack of sleep is really starting to bite at him. I also love the fact that we get to see Rani and Clyde be really, really vulnerable in this story. It's nice to have them be vulnerable and not confident for once, because it really brings us back down to earth with what these characters are, and that's individuals. And the way that they shine in this story and overcome those challenges, I think, is brilliantly brutal. And I love the way it affects the Nightmare Man. And for that reason, I give it a solid 9 out of 10. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next Sarah Jane Adventures review, which will be The Vault of Secrets. So until then, stay beautiful, you beautiful people.